I mean, for a vlog, this isn't really going well. I had hoped to create something akin to a vlog this week, and so yesterday I was looking for places to record at work, and a volunteer showed up, so no recording happened, and soon after she left, the day started, and thus I am now recording today. Usually in these videos I would be talking after having gone to Macclesfield Forest in the morning. That didn't happen today. Sally chose to remain in bed today, and I chose to sit in my corner and read, because in my last video you will have seen me mention Honeycomb by Joanne Harris, and I mentioned that her next book, And There a Door, released last week. So I decided that I was going to finish this morning, and I did, and it's fantastic, and it's dark, and it's brilliant and otherworldly, and deals with different folklore and mythology than I usually see referenced by Harris, and it thrilled me. It's also made me want to go back and read some of her earlier works from that series, because I only read the first one in the series about a decade ago, and whilst you don't need to have read the books in order, because it is the same narrator, I feel like you'll feel much more kinship with the narrator having gone through the other books with him than I ended up doing, but it was still brilliant. Otherwise, my day hasn't really been up to much. Yesterday was at work, as I say, and I started listening to The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris in the morning. Charlie of Charlie Brook chose to gift this to me on Audible because, well, she just wants everyone to read it, basically. And so far I'm enjoying it. I'm 5 chapters in and very much enjoying the introspection of this protagonist. However, I am also able to tell that it's a debut novel. Not for bad reasons, it's just that sometimes within the prose, the author does tend to over-egg the pudding a bit. We've all done it, and it doesn't stop it from being brilliant writing. Maybe I use that word too much. I enjoy the prose. It doesn't yet hit that level of pretentiousness it doesn't yet hit that level of pretension that I have remarked on in the past that Americans are renowned for. Not all of them, but some. So we'll see how I continue with that. But today, well, I got home and nobody was here, but my street was full of cars, and so I'm not currently parked outside my house. I'm parked on a road where I can't even see in my car. And had I taken Sally out this morning, I could have moved my car and put it so that I could see it from the top window. But I'm not about that life. Will I be taking her out at some point today? I don't know, because there's nobody in the house at the moment, and until they arrive, everything in my mind says get the jobs done in the house that you'd want to get done that you can't get done whilst they're here, such as recording and reading and taking an extremely long bath because you acquired a lush bath bomb from work and you want to get your money's worth. We'll see how this vlog goes. We will. Yeah. So, it's Wednesday. Last night I started reading Homestretch by Graham Norton, and it's an incredibly fast read because I finished reading it at 10 o'clock this morning, which means I read it for about 3.5 hours in total. This follows the story of Connor, a young gay man living in a village in Ireland who is at the centre of a tragedy when there is a car accident and he is thought to have been the driver, so he ends up ostracised by his community and has to leave the small village. It then follows the story of this character and other characters within this village for a period of about 30 years. I didn't like this book. I think that it is a very watered down version of what it could have been, and I did just talk about this for over 10 minutes, so I decided to share that separately as a review, and it should have been uploaded by now. But I didn't feel as though there was any depth to this story. I felt like the characters were incredibly one note, which is a common criticism that I have. I like characters to feel fully formed, even if they're only a small side character. If I can imagine what they're going to be going off and doing, then I quite like that. But I do think that this heavily relied on stereotypes to tell the tale that it wished to tell, and that was an incredibly predictable tale that we have seen many times before. And I wish I hadn't misremembered this book. I thought that in Simon Savage and Melanie Sykes' book club 2 months ago that they had recommended this book and enjoyed it, and they hadn't. And had I remembered that, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But I am glad to have read something by Graham Norton finally, even if I thought it particularly dull. After reading that, I said to my mother that she wanted to go for a walk, and we were going to go to Macclesfield Forest, but I couldn't remember whether the road was still closed, and sometimes I'm feeling a bit lazy. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm always feeling particularly, not lazy, but languid. I've been talking about this. I'm feeling kind of, how do I explain it? The world is moving quickly, incredibly fast, but I've reached this point where I seem to have slowed right down, and at the moment I can't really find the wherewithal to match the speed that everyone else is going at. Very much enjoying a slower, quieter time at the moment. And because of that, I chose to just go back to the canal, because it's a 2-minute drive to park up and go for an hour-long walk. It's about all my mother can really do as well, since, as I mentioned, she is still off sick with, well, quite honestly, she had a fall last year and broke her knee, and we didn't know that that had happened. So now she's been signed off since about April. So she can only really do this flat walk down the towpath. So we did that to a bridge, and then we turned around and Sally got to meet her first horse, which went better than I expected. She was a bit wary, but she didn't bark, she didn't go in for an attack. She just watched it go by, and then we went about our merry way. She did get spooked by something in the undergrowth, and I had to run behind it. Now, she's on the lead, but she set off at a pace, and I was like, I can't, she's gonna... So I ended up running. And I don't run. It's not good for me as running. And I'm already feeling the effects on my own knees. I was also going to wear a hat today because of the hair. Found my hat, and it was amongst some vegetables that seem to have gone off, so now it needs washing. This afternoon, my plans are to read Second Place by Rachel Cusk. We had a lot of Sod's Law going on last week. I don't tend to get prize award-winning books or prize-listed books new anymore. I much prefer to get the backlist titles that it's more difficult and you don't often see in a charity shop, because my point being, prize-winning books or books that have been long-listed or shortlisted for a prize often end up at the charity shop. I had to buy Shuggie Bain for the BookTube prize, and we hadn't yet had any copies of Shuggie Bain into the charity shop, so I just went and bought one. Then I returned to work last Friday and there was one on the shelf. I wanted to read Second Place by Rachel Cusk, so I bought a copy.
And then a hold came in at the library, so I was able to read it on my iPad, which was a second-hand purchase, I must say. A lot of my purchases are second-hand, if you didn't know. Hashtag poor. So I'm currently 40 pages into this, and already I am more impressed with this than I was with Graham Norton. It takes time and thought to follow a Rachel Cusk book, and not just to see what's being said in the story, but see what the author is saying in particular here about art and the impact art has on us. At least that has been what I've got from it in the first 40 pages. And I will be interested to see how that continues. So that's my plan for today. I also have to catch up on the Brothers Karamazov. Well, I'm reading the Karamazov Brothers, but you know I'm getting on with that. Me and Emily are buddy reading that, and I am here. Let's see. I am here, and I have to be here, which is 80 pages away. And I still have 400 pages of this dastardly book to read. I'm glad to be getting it read. And I don't know if we'd read it over a month, I'd be feeling differently. There have been moments within here where I've really enjoyed the story and found it a bit like a thriller and stories within stories. But the last 200 pages have been a slog for me. And I've not enjoyed that. I haven't enjoyed that at all. Once I've done all that reading, I want to read Territorial Rights. No, I want to read Territorial Rights by Muriel Spark, because this sees someone go off to Venice. And I adored Venice when I went there 6 years ago. I do actually want to go back. There have to be some perks to learning all this Italian, don't there? I actually would like to visit Florence as well. In fact, there's, Italy's an entire country filled with places that I would like to go. I would like to return to Rome, because when we visited Rome, well, we visited Rome and Venice at the same time, it was done on a voucher, and we weren't staying in Rome, and we were staying beside a busy motorway, and the bus wasn't where it was supposed to be to get into Rome. We arrived too early to get checked in, and when we actually got into Rome, it just wasn't what you want. We walked around Rome for 10 hours because we were lost, but also it just wasn't the experience we wanted. So I want to go back, and I want to revisit things, perhaps with not more confidence, but I just like to give it a second chance. But I've wanted to visit Florence since I was 16, and I first saw it in either one of these touristy magazines or something. Indeed, I did plan on stockpiling some funds and trying to get there, but it never happened. And it's been 13 years. It's actually been nearly 4 years since I had a holiday, because back in 2000, could it have been 2017? I don't know. I went to Halkidiki. That was 2017. I can't remember when I went to Whitby. Could have been the year before that. I haven't had an holiday in 4 years. And even if I just go somewhere in this country, I'd like to go somewhere again. I'd like to have a feeling of not being obligated to get stuff done. Just being away from it all. Kind of like I'm doing this afternoon, where I'll just be sat in a corner reading and drinking tea. But I'd like to go to somebody else's house and read and drink tea with no interruptions. I'll see.
awoke this morning to blue skies and sunshine, and I thought this would be a perfect day to go for a nice long walk. There's a bit of a breeze in the air, so it wouldn't be too heavy. So I went and I showered, and I got straight out of the shower and into pyjamas. And from that point onward, I recognised that this day was going to be a day of reading, achieving nothing in other people's eyes, and not caring about it. Yesterday, I finished reading Second Place by Rachel Cusk. This is a book that is going to have to sit with me for a while. I believe there is a lot going on in here to go and unpick, and it does bear rereading, and I think it's one of those books where the more you read, the more you will get out of it. Similar to Ali Smith's Seasonal Quartet, I think you read it once for almost an entertainment value and figure out what it's about, and then you have to go back in to see what the author is actually saying. It seems something of an advancement of the narratorial voice that I saw in The Country Life, in that it is incredibly introspective and there isn't really much by way of plot, but just these short, sharp bursts of action that come in and disrupt the overall narrative tone. There is some sort of unease and tension between the lines of the entirety of this rather short tome. There's a lot to be said about art and the artist and the separation of the two, and our expectations of artists and creators. At the back of the book, the author has said that this book owes a debt to Lorenzo Inteos by Mabel Dodge Luhan, which was a 1932 memoir of the time D.H. Lawrence went to stay with her. Like I say, it's something I will have to go back to and reconsider. If I was to place it against the other Cusks that I've read so far, I wouldn't say as I had enjoyed the experience as much as those two books, but the thing continues with Cusk in that I don't know what it is that I like about her work. I am unable to properly put that all together. But there is something within the writing that I do enjoy. And I'm often reminded of some of the classic writers in the way that Cusk writes. I'm not quite sure she's able to write emotion, and I think that's always going to be a sticking point for me. Second Place is now read, and I'm going to go and watch people's reviews and see what they thought of it and see whether that can help me figure out how I think about it, because currently it's a jumble of thoughts and ideas and I can't really see the cohesion or the way through. Yesterday I did say that I wanted to read Territorial Rights by Muriel Spark once I'd read this week's pages of The Karamazov Brothers by Dostoevsky. While Dostoevsky continues to disappoint me, this week's pages actually could have been completely removed from the novel because they just went over what we'd gone over in the previous 100 pages. And so I messaged Emily this morning, incredibly disappointed about that. Once again, here we have a book that is incredibly good. I'm putting over there because it's on the desk. We have a book that has some great thoughts in there, but I think that it's flogging the dead horse here and that it keeps going over old ground
without really drawing any conclusions. And it's very verbose and grandiloquent. In the beginning, I was reminded of Dickens in the way that this had been translated, and I was here for it. But, I mean, maybe this is still a bit like Dickens in that we're going over old ground again and again without really getting anywhere. But there is something within the prose of Dickens that I think is missing here. And I don't think that that's a translation issue. I think that it's that these 80 pages were completely unnecessary to tell the story, because they did just repeat everything we'd just gone through. And despite saying that I wanted to read Territorial Rights by Muriel Spark yesterday, I chose to read The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher by Hilary Mantel, which is a short story collection that was released in 2014 and compiles short stories from the 20 years prior to that. Indeed, the first story in here, well, it's not the first story. One story in here comes from 1993, and I believe that that is very telling. It is called Harley Street. And there's the question in there as to whether it's lesbians or vampires. And I felt as though it was a bit outdated and needed refreshing. But I do believe that this is a very good collection that shows the strength of Hilary Mantel's prose. With her previous collection, Learning to Talk, that I read last week, I didn't really see the greatness in the prose that I have come to expect. I found it somewhat lacking, but I could see why all these stories have been included in that collection. Here, we have some very strong stories indeed. I did go back and check. Sorry to Disturb is the first story in here, and it's called a memoir in the back when it was first published, because that one was the one that seemed as though it was inspired by Hilary Mantel's life events the most. But again, we have stories in here that show us the darker parts of humanity, and we get some of the more criminal characters, really. Our protagonists aren't always goody two-shoes or people you can root for. And even then, what we have is a collection that goes on to show us more of the grotesquerie that Mantel is known for including in her prose. Similarly, you have the dark humour, the bleakness that sets her apart, really, that I have come to enjoy, because it is incredibly dark humour at the times. At the times, it's incredibly dark humour at times, but it appeals to my sensibilities. I think that the title story, The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher, is a well-written tale, but it is not my favourite from the collection. I have a soft spot for the long QT. I have no idea what QT means, but it's an incredibly short story, but very dark, twisted, and humorous, ironic, impactful. Some of them I do think lacked a bit and did that thing in short stories where it was just this scene and there didn't really seem to be much behind it, but then Mantel's writing was quite good. So there was some there that I was a bit iffy about and didn't really... I felt like they'd just been put in here as filler stories. They didn't really add much to the collection. But Sorry to Disturb, Comet and the Long QT, and indeed Winter Break, those first 5 stories in here really set up for a strong collection. And I feel like the latter half of the collection let the book down. But I do really appreciate having got to have read Mantel's collection. And it is a book that throughout reading, I was looking forward to going back and rereading and exploring these short stories further. And they reminded me of the short stories that I enjoyed when I was at uni, and this was the first time I'd been introduced to the genre. So I was grateful for that reminder. I think they are very good short stories. I just think that my favourites were towards the start of the collection, which meant that the end was always going to be a bit of a letdown. But I do also think that it is a very strong short story collection, and if you are in the mood for reading them, you couldn't go wrong with reading these very dark, sometimes twisted, sometimes ironic tales. And now, what am I going to do with the rest of my day? Well, I watched RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars 6, and this felt like a poor episode indeed. I've seen spoilers for the next 2 episodes. Indeed, I've seen spoilers for the entire season, and it's these next 2 episodes that I am wary about, because I know how they're going to go, and I'm going to be somewhat dismayed if the result of not the next week's episode, but the week after, I'm going to be dismayed by the result at the end of that episode. I know it. I'm putting it out into the world knows it, if these spoilers are correct. But what can you do? It's a reality competition. I did take Territorial rights downstairs with the intention of reading that today, but family came home after I'd finished the Hilary Mantel, and so I've had 2 hours of not reading whilst I chatted to them. I do want to get a tiny bit of writing done because there is that little bit of restlessness about me, but nowhere near where I'm like, I need to stick at this for days and not focus on anything else at all. But I don't know what I want to read because, as I say, Territorial Rights yesterday I was really in the mood for, and I was thinking, it's Venice and I want to return to Venice, and I gave that whole thing. But now after reading the Mantel, I'm like, do I start A Place of Greater Safety? This comes about because I was thinking to read all the shorter books that I got at the library, including China Room, because I think that someone will reserve this and I won't be able to renew it. But I found out that I actually get 8 renewals now, whereas you only used to get 3. So that means that I could indeed actually have these books for 24 weeks. Of course, when I renew them, it will only be 21. I was going to read the shorter books and then return them so I could take more out next week. But now I wonder, do I just focus on A Place of Greater Safety because it's Mantel and I like her? I don't know. I don't even know when I'm ending this vlog. I've just been recording with no idea as to when I'm gonna upload or share this. I could go the whole week, couldn't I? Ugh. But I'm also planning on wearing this top again tomorrow because I just feel so lazy at the moment. It's not even laziness. It's not laziness. It's just a lack of wherewithal to do anything but sup tea and sit in a corner when my family aren't here, because it's the only time I feel like I get to appreciate silence. This shirt, this top happens to be oversized, and despite having lost the weight, sometimes there's just something nice about having something completely shapeless on you that means folk can't really comment on weight loss because they can't tell whether you've lost weight or not. Alright. I will speak to you at some point, and what else can I say? Well, I lied to you. So, Thursday, it's now Saturday night. Saturday evening. It is now Saturday evening. Il sabato sera. La sera di sabato. Either way, it's that. And I am only now finding the time in which to record an ending to this video. On Thursday night, I received a text message from my area manager. We've run out of bank books. Would I go to our head office at 8:30 the following morning and get some? Well, I'm usually at work by then. So, I did what she said, knowing that it would make me late to the shop, but technically I've already started work because I've been to our head office. By the time I eventually got to work, after sitting through loads of temporary traffic lights that I didn't know were there, I had no time to record to say anything about what I'd done on Thursday. And then last night got home and it was busy again. And then today, could not find the device I use in my car to record clips, and also arrived to work late because of these temporary traffic lights again. They're building a new road, they're getting rid of the countryside. Industrialisation, it's great, it's progress. We're getting rid of more Greenland, and we are putting roads where land floods all the time, and building on concrete, and there's nothing for the rain to go into, and it's just great. And maybe I should have bought a narrowboat when I had the chance, because the chances are that the world's going to be underwater anyway if it doesn't burn. Maybe we'll just get boiling water. Anyway, on the way to work, I listened to The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris, or whatever it's called, and it's long listed for the Booker, and I listened to it to work and from work yesterday, and today I just listened to it to work, because by the time I got to work it made me that sad that I couldn't bear the idea of listening to it again all the way home. So I listened to the Giornalisti instead, and realised I downloaded the wrong album to my phone, so the song that I wanted to listen to wasn't even on there. If you haven't seen the film in which their song's the soundtrack to, Sotto il sole di Leccioni, or Under the Chanson, then I recommend it. Or I recommend the album. I'm recommending too many Italian things at the moment, but what can you do? Thursday, after I spoke to you, I started with A Place of Greater Safety by Hilary Mantel, got 50 pages in and realised this is not the book that I want to read right now. Shuggie Bain I have to read for the BookTube Prize, and I tried reading some of that, but wasn't in the mood for that. I tried reading some of Territorial Rights by Muriel Spark, but apparently I'm not in the mood for that either, even though I thought I was on Thursday. So I read The Man Who Wouldn't Get Up and Other Stories by David Lodge. So this is a very small selection of stories from 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and finally in the 2000s, spanning 50 years, 5 decades of his career, with just very selected works indeed. The start of this book, I could tell, was written around the same time as the story that I read 2 months ago, and there is the humour there that reminded me of the humour of the time. The Man Who Wouldn't Get Up, I said, the title reminded me of Sue Townsend's book, The Woman Who Went to Bed for a Year. David Lodge does mention that in the start, that he doesn't know if Sue Townsend was inspired by him. They might have just had similar ideas, but it's very much a realistic representation of depression and the way that the world will leave you behind. And again, there are humorous tales in here. One story in here I found was not to my tastes, and that was Hotel de Boobs. It just talked about women's breasts too much, and David Lodge does mention it at the start of this book and at the end of this book, that humour has changed, and the things that were acceptable back then are no longer acceptable now, but they are perhaps some of his best known works. I don't know. That story is set at a hotel where all the women go around with bare chests, and there's a lot of talk about breasts. And I had no interest. I have no interest. I suppose there was a bit of dramatic irony in that then the story transitions and it turns out that a writer has been writing the story about this topless resort, and all of his pages have been blown by the wind, and so all the women who are in this resort are now going to see what he's been writing about them, and so they're going to have to leave. Where the Climate's Sultry was a good sense and reminded me somewhat of the 60s comedies, and I was here for that. It reminded me a bit of that TV show that ended up with a spin-off called Robin's Nest. It had the actors who were in George and Mildred in it. I've forgotten it now. But Where the Climate's Sultry. There are, again, out of the entire book, there's only 2 stories that I didn't really get on with. So that's fine. David Lodge, still humorous, still enjoyed what I read. And I look forward to the next book of his that I've got to get to. I don't know what I'm going to read now. As I say, The Sweetness of Water, whilst I think is written incredibly well, is a book that I'm going to have to space out over time because it's a lot darker than I thought it would be. And right now, it's not necessarily the sort of thing that I am looking for in fiction. It's one of those where I want to listen to it, but I also recognise that the story is going to make me sad, and I'm not really in the mood to feel that emotion right now. So would it be better off holding off on that one? I don't know. Also, I am really in the mood to write. Last night I recognised that usually when I read a ton of books all at once and I get them out of the way, it's in the lead up to like a big burst of writing, and that started last night. And it was as though in my head there was a breakthrough about this next chapter of Doris, and so I was writing past the time that I should have been writing because of when I got up for work. And I have my plans all set now, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting that done and dusted. As we know, I want to use this month to finish writing the Doris book, so hopefully by September it'll be done, and then it's going back and editing the thing. Well, definitely a very major edit on the first part. I don't know whether I'll need to do much editing on the second part because I do edit as I go, and that's very much, I think, going to be a proofread job or whatever. We will see when I get to it, how everything fits together and how everything works. I could have repeated jokes tons, but there you go. Reading-wise, I think that I might try a Rachel Cusk next with outline. Here we have Breasts again. I didn't know that this is the cover that I was going to get when I was at the library. I thought I was getting the cover that matched up with Kudos or Transit. So I was very blasé about pulling this book off the reserves shelf. Surrounded by people and breasts. Now, I know it's probably seen as artistic, but I just could guarantee what some of those people were thinking about the young, about the man who just pulled a book out with breasts on the cover. And I just wanted to say to them, well, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. I got this for purely literary purposes. Even when my sister went, she looked and she went, breasts? I don't know. I'm an old northern prude. I'm like your maiden aunt. Like, gave me a touch of the vapours a bit, you know. People thinking I might have the mild interest in that. Anyway, I'm going to go. And definitely have a cup of tea. And I don't know when I'll record another video like this because they take time and they take effort. But I do think I've had something of a good reading week. Even if it's been a funny old one. And as it's Saturday, I'm probably going to do note, but read and write, and drink tea. And not have soup because I've run out. Well, if you have read any of the books that I've talked about and would like to discuss them, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, got something out of this video. I don't know. And until next time, that is all.